Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the launch text for Unit 1 of our class, which is our fear unit. Remember, we're going to be answering the question, how does fear cause people to act negatively, or how does fear negatively affect people, or how does it make people do stupid things? So, how does fear negatively affect people or cause them to do dumb things is our essay question. Very simple question. There are so many different answers to do that. Now, before we start checking out sources, which we're going to use to help us to answer our question. Because remember, we can answer this question from our own head, right? I could answer this right now. I could write a whole essay about how fear makes people do really dumb things. It makes them, sometimes when people are afraid, they run around real fast. They lose their ability to think, right? They get so afraid that they start shaking, they start sweating. There's all sorts of ways that fear can negatively affect people or cause them to do knuckleheaded things. Think about when you're afraid to ask somebody like that you like for a date or to be your boyfriend or girlfriend. That fear might cause you to act differently when you're around that person. I know before my wife and I were married, in the beginning of our relationship, I would get very nervous around her. I would stutter. Sometimes I would get sick to my stomach. I would get so upset and anxious. And sometimes she would say to me, "Dude, are you okay?" And I'd be like, "Ah," and I would act the fool because I was afraid, right? So there are so many things that fear can do to you. But when it comes to writing our essay, we need to be able to insert other people's quotes and ideas to bolster and strengthen ours, correct? So I'm not just going to say fear causes us to do many things. These are those things and I'm out the door. I'm going to say fear causes people to do a lot of crazy things, right? Check out this example from this story, or consider the following quote from this story. And then I give that quote and I say, this quote clearly shows how fear negatively affected the character or caused the character to do some knuckleheaded things. And that is indicative of what fear really does in real life. So that's another example of it. So this launch text is pretty cool, what we're about to read right now. It's called My Introduction to Gothic Literature, is actually an example of an explanatory essay, which you're going to be writing at the end of this unit, right? And you're going to be answering that question in an explanatory essay, why or how fear causes people to do knuckleheaded or dumb things, or how it just negatively affects them, right? And you're going to give loads of examples from your own life, as well as from literature and stories and articles and newspapers and stuff like that. So tonight's homework for your launch text is very simple. You have to give me a paragraph summary, a 1-paragraph summary of the launch text that we're about to read right now. You have to, and this is very important, you have to include one cited quote from the article or from the essay, as to show that you know how to cite and to quote things. And so you're going to say, you're going to just consider the following quote, give the page number, and then you're done. So we'll talk about that when we get to it. But right now, let's read our launch text, My Introduction to Gothic Literature. So, how does someone fall in love? Oh, by the way, I want to point something out. If you look at this, in fact, let me present it to you so you can see what it is that I am reading to you. Hold on a second. Give me a second. Let's present a tab. Let's go to your introduction to Gothic literature. So here it is. It's in your textbook. It is on page number 6 inside Unit 1 of your textbook. You can obviously use the PDF version, which I'm doing right now on the computer, or the book itself. It really doesn't matter. So again, let's take a look at this. How does someone fall? Oh, by the way, one last thing I wanted to say. If you'll notice, there are 5 paragraphs. I need you to give me a 1-paragraph summary of this. An idea would be to read through the whole thing and just summarize everything that you just learned. Or another idea, and some people like to do this, is for each of the 5 paragraphs, give a 2-sentence summary of what you learned in that paragraph. And then at the end, you'll have 10 sentences, which is a full paragraph, and then you are done. But let's just see how we do this. 1. How does someone fall in love with a particular kind of writing or an author who has long departed this life? What draws us to find in words the echoes of our own fears or longings? For those of us lucky enough to have a literary passion, the story of how we met our first love is probably just like tales of other first meetings, funny or quirky, full of accident and coincidence. My literary passion is Edgar Allan Poe, and I met him in print when I was 14 years old. All right, so I now know, reading the first paragraph of this launch text essay, I now know Oh, by the way, I don't think I mentioned this, but let me point it out real quickly. This essay is an example of what you're going to write at the end. This author is doing exactly what you're going to do at the end. You are going to give your reason, and then you're going to link it and give quotes from other things. You're going to bolster your argument with citations and annotations from outside sources, which she's about to do for us. But let's take a look at our first paragraph. And what does it explain? What is this all about? She describes that some people are lucky enough to have a literary passion, in other words, fall in love with books or authors. And she says she fell in love when she was young, when she was 14, with Edgar Allan Poe. So there's your first two sentences. The author of this essay describes how people fall in love with authors or types of stories, period. And she further explains how she fell in love reading Edgar Allan Poe when she was 14 years old. In fact, if you'd like to give your quote right now, you can. Consider the following quote. My literary passion is Edgar Allan Poe, and I met him in print when I was 14 years old. Comma quotes. This quote clearly shows when and how she fell in love with Edgar Allan Poe. Boom, and there's your quote. Let's consider. All right, let's go to the next paragraph. It was just after a huge storm that had featured an alarmingly beautiful display of lightning and wind. The power had been knocked out, and I was sitting at a window watching the wet night grow darker. I had been living with my grandmother for a few weeks while my parents figured things out. I loved my grandmother, but I couldn't shake the sadness and anxiety I was feeling. The storm had been a welcome diversion. As the clouds cleared, a fog rose and filtered the moonlight, casting a bluish hue over the yard. The scene was moody and solemn, but beautiful. My grandmother broke my reverie by bustling into the room, carrying 2 lit candles and a book. It'll take hours for the electric company to get all the way out here to fix the power, she said. Why don't you read? I'll go find some batteries for the flashlights. Okay, next paragraph. We learned the reason why she started reading was because there was a power blackout. Boom, one more sentence. Another sentence. Her grandmother gave her the idea that she should start reading while the power was out to pass the time. Done with that paragraph. And if you'd like to put a quote in there, you can say, consider the following quote. Why don't you read? I'll go find some batteries for the flashlights, comma quotes. This quote clearly shows how her grandmother was the beginning of her literary passion. Boom, next paragraph. She set the book and a can. Oh, I lost my spot. Hold on a second. Sorry, everybody. She set the candle and a book on the floor and rushed out as though she had to catch the batteries before they fled. I picked up the book she had left on the floor. It was a collection of old stories, just a paperback and not much to look at. I turned to one by Poe, The Cask of Amontillado. Set during the carnival season in an unnamed European city, the story features an unhinged narrator named Montresor who plots revenge on an acquaintance. I liked the gruesome setting of the mysterious burial vault. In Poe's descriptions, I could practically smell the dust and mold, and I was stunned by the horrible ending. But what struck me most was how Montresor spoke directly to the reader, to me. He expected my sympathy as he brought his terrible revenge. Up to that point, all the stories I had ever read had set the criminal or lunatic at a distance. They didn't draw me into a mind that was a truly scary place to be. This one did. Okay, our next paragraph, we learned why she fell in love with Edgar Allan Poe. Why? Because one, it says, because it has a crazy, horrible ending. Two, because she learned that because in this story, they made the bad guy somebody like they focused on the bad guy in a way she had never seen before. So the third paragraph is all about why she fell in love with Edgar Allan Poe. So I mean, this summary is writing itself. A couple of sentences about how some people are lucky to live in. Some people are lucky to have a literary passion, and hers she found when she was 14, when she was at her grandmother's. Another thing, talk about how her grandmother brought her these books and these and these flashlights when the power went out. Next paragraph, we found out why she fell in love with Poe. She picked up a Poe story and she fell in love with it because it's dark and evil almost, and that caught her attention. You can give another quote from this one. Consider the following quote. They were tales full of darkness and light, just like the storm I enjoyed with its thunder and lightning. Or consider the following quote. They were stories that made all I felt and feared seem less of a burden. Oh my God, that's such a great quote, ladies and gentlemen. Consider the following quote. They were stories that made all I felt and feared seem less of a burden. That's my sentence right there. So This quote clearly shows why she fell in love reading Edgar Allan Poe. And that is because it made her forget her problems in her life, the problems with her family, that her parents were breaking up. Perfect. Let's go. We have one more paragraph left. That evening spent in darkness, both real and imaginary, never left me. The stories helped me understand that life is not easy and people are complex, simultaneously strong and weak, wonderful and terrible. That's a great quote right there. Though I could not articulate it then, I can now. The stories helped me see that life can be a mansion full of secrets and dark passages, but also of beauty and light. They helped me choose to embrace it all. After another week at my grandmother's, I went home armed with stories to see me through whatever might come. And finally, our last paragraph, she describes how stories helped her to be a stronger person and to better understand the world around her. OMG. So I would finish off this summary by saying, and finally, our author explains to us why stories help her in life. Consider the following quote. The stories helped me see that life can be a mansion full of secrets and dark passages, but also of beauty and light. This quote clearly shows how important these stories were to this girl and why she continues to read. How about this one? Consider the following quote. They helped me choose to embrace it all. After another week at my grandmother's, I went home armed with stories to see me through whatever might come. Comma quotes. This quote clearly shows that reading has helped this girl get through the problems of her childhood, and she knows will help her throughout the rest of her life. Boom, you are out the door. So again, ladies and gentlemen, your homework for tonight for this launch text is to write a 1-paragraph summary. Describe to me what you just learned in 1 paragraph, right? Again, a great suggestion. Read each paragraph and do a 2-sentence jot down of what you just learned. In fact, you can go back to this video and write down what I said each paragraph was about. But don't forget, you have to give 1 quote. So after you explain something, you just say, consider the following quote and give the quote that proves what you explained. You could say something like, the author of this essay learned through reading that she can learn about life and it'd be easier for her to handle. Consider the following quote. The stories help me see that life can be a mansion full of secrets and dark passages, but also a beauty of light. They help me choose to embrace it all. Then I would put my page number. In this case, it would be page number 7 in parentheses. And then afterwards, this quote clearly shows that reading helps this author to deal with the problems of life. And then you are out the door. Ladies and gentlemen, fabulous job on this. Again, nothing really to worry about when it comes to this assignment. 1-paragraph summary of what you learned, and then make sure somewhere in there you have at least 1 annotated and cited quote. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great day. Great job.